If we build on our knowledge of tracing, then if we now place an image If we build on our knowledge of using the pen tool to trace an image, we can now build on that. So if we now place a different kind of image to work from, this time we'll choose the portrait setting and we'll choose a portrait image. Again, if we click and drag, we can make the image the right size. Like before, if we change the opacity of that image and then we lock it into position, so remember that here we're going to do Command and 2. What we can now start to do is we can use the pen tool to start drawing around the head. Now again, this is one of those great examples where as we start to trace we realise of course that we've got the fill option. So let's just stop this for the moment, come back to the selection tool, click on our shape, go back up to here to go back to the no fill option. Think about the weight of our line. We'll delete the whole thing and start again. So we can move from one position to another position. And of course we can curve as well. One can think about this a bit like the way that we did when we were doing this stencil print workshop. Now we've made our initial decisions here, so again we can modify those shapes by using the direct selection tool. Changing the handlebars, changing the position of the anchor points until we're happy that we've made the right sort of general decision. And what we can do now is we can apply a fill colour. Now obviously what would be really useful is to start building into this shape more complicated shapes. So we can obviously place that over the top of this, but also this fill. We can modify the opacity of that fill. So it's quite useful to take that right down so we can see where the next layer of tone might be. What I'm going to do for the moment is as I start to draw another shape, when I start to use the pen tool, I could potentially modify the shape that I've got here. So again, now that I've got that shape, I'm going to hit Command and 2 to lock that shape into position. This enables me to start drawing a hairline. Now in this instance, obviously you can see that I've got a fill activated. I think I can probably work around that one quite quickly without it being too problematic for my drawing. I'd like that to be a darker colour, and I'd like this time there to be no stroke colour at all, so I've just literally got a shape. I'm now going to use, so again I'm going to select that shape and I'm going to hit Command and 2 just to lock that into position. What I'm now going to do is go back to the pen tool and start to draw my next. So again here, this is a point where the fill is going to be rather irritating, so I'll put my line back on and I'll get rid of my fill altogether. And I might just zoom in a bit as well, so I can use the magnifying glass just to zoom in. So now I might start to trace off the darker tones that I can see. And now I can choose another fill colour. And I don't want to have a stroke colour. Now what we can do is we can start to think a little bit more about how the whole image is working. So if I select everything, go to Object, I can unlock all. I can now think about what's in front of what. So for instance, if I right click on there, I can arrange that shape to be in the front, bringing the hairline over the top of the head. I can click on this shape and I can return its opacity back to 100%. And now I can start to look at my image and think, what do I need extra on here? So I can go back to changing the opacity of that image. I'll also probably do the same with these, so they're just less obtrusive in my drawing. Then I'll select all, and again I'm going to hit Command and 2 just to lock everything. I'm now going to come in, so again I'm going to unselect or have no fill. I'm going to come back to my shape builder here, pen tool. Now of course I could build the glasses with the shape tool. And I could fill that with a colour. But in all honesty, rather than doing that, if I get rid of that completely, it might be much better for me to draw with the paintbrush instead. Now when you draw in Illustrator with the paintbrush, you have the option of looking at how you draw that line. If we double click on the brush tool for the moment, you've got a series of different options. And if I move this cursor up here, I can change the smoothness of my line. So if I now go to the brush tool and draw between those 2 points, you can see that what happens is that Illustrator gives that line a bit more confidence. It sort of simplifies it down a bit. Now, like before, everything that I've drawn, every element that I've drawn is something which can be re-edited. So I can change the thickness of my lines if need be. I can change the colour of my lines if need be. I can change the opacity of my lines if need be. I can also change the kind of brush that I'm using. So if I now start to go down to, say, a different kind of brush, you can now see that I've got more of a sort of brushy type mark. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to undo my command there, but I'm going to change the opacity of my brush mark. Because I've selected that area up there, you can see it's applied that different kind of brush mark. So I don't want that to happen. So I needed to unselect that brush mark before I then made a modification to it. So I'm just going to come up here, change to this brush setting. Okay, now I'm going to change the opacity of my colour. I'm going to keep the stroke colour as the colour I'm going to work with. I'm going to modify my stroke colour. I'm now going to start to build into my drawing. A bit more colour. Now we will go to Object, Unlock All. Now we're going to return back to the opacity of our shapes being 100%. The original photograph that I placed in the image. Again, I think is still locked, so yeah, it's still locked. Now you can see I've selected the photograph. Now I've deleted the photograph, and that's showing me what the illustration looks like. I could now decide whether I want that to have a colour, so I might just delete that now. And so we can now see my finished Illustrator file At the moment, all of these elements that I've created are all individual elements. So if I use the move tool, I'm only moving individual elements. If I select all of the elements, I can now group them. Now that they're grouped, I can select the whole of the head. And once I've created the whole of the head, that means that I can start to play around with that particular head. Obviously, if I go backwards, I can take it to this position. Of course, if I want to modify this a bit further, I can do. In order for me to do that, I'm going to have to go back and ungroup everything. So what I'm going to do now is, if I select all, object, ungroup, I might decide that I want to change the colour of that head. I might decide I want to change the colour of that highlight. And all of those things are re-editable. Again, if I go Command and Z and Command and Z, I take it back to the position that I had before. So we can build shapes through the use of the pen tool. We can also start to use the brush tool. And at the moment, we've used the default settings of the brush. The brushes in Illustrator can be added to. You can build your own custom-made brushes, but equally, the possibilities of the brush become much more interesting when you use the idea of a drawing tablet, because a drawing tablet then gives your brush marks touch sensitivity.